The X-E4 is the newest interchangeable lens camera from Fujifilm. And similar to the X Pro 3, this camera takes a few key and notable departures from its predecessor. So in this first impressions, I'm going to talk about the experience of using it across multiple shoots. I still have a bit more testing to do across some other productions in preparation for the full review on this channel, but here I'll just talk about some of my early thoughts and thinking about who might get the most value from this camera.
But God might be on vacation, and the promised land ain't never promised. My baby telling me to be patient, but the devil always working overnight, my darling.
Similar to the X Pro 3, the camera here inherits that 4th generation sensor and processor that was introduced by the Fujifilm X-T3. And if you don't know by now, this is a very capable processor and sensor combination. You have access to numerous Fujifilm film simulations that can really alter the look of your image, but also give you a great starting point in your editing. And one of the benefits here is that you can shoot in both RAW and JPEG, and the reason you might want to shoot JPEG as well is because the files look so good. When I was using this camera, similar to my other Fujifilm cameras, I turned on RAW plus JPEG, used some of my custom recipes. You can find a link to them in the description, and with those recipes, I was able to get some remarkable images right out of camera, not having to edit and process it and throwing it into some sort of RAW converter. And that comes together for two really key benefits with the Fujifilm system and their modern cameras, and that one being you're saving time in your editing post-processing world, where sometimes you may just have to crop the image and you're good to go. You have something that's just great out of camera. And number two, it gives you this sort of positive feedback in the field that when you're using this and you're seeing the results, even on the lower resolution back LCD, you're just feeling a little bit more motivated to keep shooting. You know, it's a little bit of a taste, a little bit of wetting of the palate there. Do people say wetting of the palate? It's this extra push that encourages you to keep creating. So again, that 4th generation processor and sensor, some proven technology that really gives you great results. The upgrade to this sensor and processor also bring advancements to your autofocus capabilities, where this one is noticeably faster than its predecessor, allowing you to not only focus faster, but more accurately and in even lower light environments, which can come clutch when you're shooting in something that largely is based on natural lighting. And I also want to mention that you're getting some pretty good video features as well, where you can shoot 4K up to 30p at a decent bitrate, and when you're pairing this with the Eterna film simulation, you can get a pretty good YouTube camera, or if it's just something that you're shooting for social media and maybe even doing some vlogging, well, it's more than enough for that kind of work. Now, while this camera can do slow motion as well, a lot of the video functionality is limited, right? You're doing 8-bit 420 internally, and what that basically means is you're not getting as rich, as much depth as you would to your video file as you would in a camera like an X-T3 or an X-T4. So is this a camera you'd be looking at to do your YouTube channel? Maybe not the first one, because there might be even some previous generation cameras that can do it better. Holding this camera without any of its accessories in the hand, it felt nice. It isn't the most comfortable if you have larger hands, but it was by no means abrasive. It didn't make you feel that after you were holding it for a few hours that, you know, your hands were about to cramp up or anything, but I guess that may differ from person to person. I will say though, for me personally, using the thumb rest and the grip that you can buy as an option to the X-E4, that made the shooting experience much better, right? It just had a place where my thumb can rest easily, as the name would suggest, and where my middle finger wasn't clasping on too tightly. It just felt a bit more snug and a bit more effortless in when I was manipulating this camera. So I threw those on and really didn't take them off when I was shooting with it. And I'll talk more about the shooting experience, but I want to talk about the design, because you have this nice minimal industrial design that is akin to the X100V. It's really clean, it looks vintage and classy, as some people would say. You know, I take this to set with me and I'd give it to the stylists, to the assistants, to models even, and just to gauge their reaction. And it was vintage, classy, cool, retro, like these are the words that they'd use to describe this camera. And it looks really damn nice. Now, here's the thing though, similar to the X Pro 3, while not as drastic, there have been some noticeable changes. Well, on the back, you're not getting as many buttons as you would on the X-E3. And here's the big one. Here's one thing where the X-E3 destroys this camera, in my opinion, and that is this camera here doesn't have that focus switch on the front of the camera or even a version of it on the side of the camera. So switching between single point, continuous, or manual focus, you can't do that with the flick of a switch. And for someone like me, that is something that was a bit challenging. You know, I found myself having to make a decision. With Fujifilm cameras, you can press and hold the display button on the back and customize the shortcuts, what each button does. And you get a couple on the top, you get a few on the back, and I ultimately decided to forego back button focusing and using that as a button to quickly go into my focus switching. And when I press that button, I can decide, okay, let's do manual focus or let's do continuous focus. And here's the thing, a feature like that, it really depends on how you shoot. And I think that might be the thesis for my review about this camera. It really comes down to how you shoot, and that might dictate whether this camera is for you or not. You see, if you've been following the recent releases that Fujifilm has been putting out, both their cameras and their lenses, you can see that there's a bit of lengthening happening to their product lineup. There's quite a bit of cameras available, and if you're being specific, there's about 9 unique offerings when it comes to their digital imaging in the X-mount system. And deciding between them, well, I think with the recent releases, Fuji's trying to draw a stronger line of demarcation between them. That is to say that if you're about to decide a camera, there's key differences between each one that speak to the type of creator that you are, and in a way that I like. And what I mean by that is, most of these cameras have now the same sensor, the same processor, and in large part, a lot of the same photography features where video functionality may differ, and that's largely because, in my opinion, the size of the unit itself. So if you're a customer, right, and you're brand new to the Fujifilm ecosystem, you can pick out something and know that you can create great images and you're not being shortchanged in some way with respect to that. And you can just focus on, you know, the look, the feel, and how you shoot, and allow that to make the decision for you with respect to a new Fujifilm camera. And I'll expand on this in my full review and talk a bit more at length about what I think about this camera and how it fits in the product lineup. But just some early thoughts is that it's a camera that isn't really targeting enthusiasts and professionals. I think it's really speaking to those that are getting started, that might be newer to the Fujifilm space, and speaking to those that want to have, you know, a bit of the sex appeal that Fujifilm's X100V brings, but the flexibility to use any kind of Fuji glass, and also consider that it comes in at a much lower price point. While the viewfinder resolution and features and functionality hasn't really been upgraded, it still sits off to the left to give you that fake rangefinder feel, so maybe more than enough for some users. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and defend it. I feel like there should have been a bit of an upgrade here, but it's all about trade-offs at this point. You know, when they're fighting to get to a specific price point, some concessions had to be made, and I imagine this may be one of them. In any case, I think that the people that are being targeted with the X-E4, there isn't too much of a focus on that viewfinder resolution. But I could be wrong, so let me know in the comments. Now, some of you may be wondering, you know, as a person that owns multiple Fuji cameras, a ton of lenses, and shooting in this ecosystem for a very long time, how did I feel, you know, as a pro using this camera? I had to change how I shoot. I had to really sort of put on new shoes, and I largely looked to other people that aren't photographers, looking at their reaction to sort of base how I navigated this solution. And largely, people were holding this up using the back LCD to compose their image and shooting quite liberally, and, you know, looking at the results and being motivated to shoot even more, like I alluded to earlier. I found that when I stopped thinking like a photographer, if that makes sense, and just allowed myself to have fun and to just snap and sometimes be creative and throw the settings out of whack in terms of shutter speed and aperture, and just allowed myself to capture as many moments and essence in a way. That's where this camera really felt fun for me. It made me want to keep using it. When I paired this with the brand new 27mm f2.8 RWR lens, because that lens, really rewards you, and it's really something that I should have considered sooner, it makes for an experience that doesn't have to take itself too seriously. And I think that might appeal to some type of creator where they have a professional solution and they want something that is just a bit more freeing. And there you have it. Those are my first impressions of the Fujifilm X-E4. I still gotta put some more reps on this thing, shoot a few more images, and start editing a few of these images to give you my final thoughts for my honest review that's coming maybe in a few weeks or so. But I think this is something that is definitely catering to a lot of people that may not be in a Fujifilm solution right now. In any case, I'd love to hear what you guys think, so let me know in the comments below and let's continue our conversation there. As always, my name's Gadgen. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.